There are family names that echo through the soul of music, names that don't just make records, they make history. Jackson, Braxton, DeBarge, and standing proudly among them LeVert. Before the fame, before the heartbreak, before tragedy turned harmony into silence, there were just two brothers from Cleveland, Gerald and Sean, chasing the sound that lived in their father's shadow. Their father wasn't just any man. He was Eddie LeVert, the thunderous voice behind the OJs. So when people said, these kids sound like a younger version of their daddy's group, they weren't lying. The bloodline ran deep with rhythm. But Gerald, he wasn't content with being someone's son. He wanted to be the voice of a new kind of soul man, a man who could make women cry, make grown men feel something again, and still bring fire to a stage like it was built for him. And Sean, the loyal brother who never asked for fame, just family. Together with their childhood friend Mark Gordon, they built a dream called LeVert, a dream that burned bright but burned fast. Their story isn't just about success, it's about pressure, brotherhood, betrayal, and pain. It's about how the pursuit of perfection and the need to carry a legacy can destroy even the most gifted hearts. Before it was over, they'd earned platinum records, Billboard hits, and standing ovations across the world, but behind the lights and the love songs, something was breaking. And when it finally broke, it left a silence too heavy for music to fill. This is the story of LeVert, the brothers who gave everything to R&B and lost it all. Before the stages, before the screaming fans, before the platinum plaques, there was just Cleveland, Ohio. A working class city where rhythm came from the soul, not the studio. That's where Gerald and Sean LeVert were born, two sons of Eddie LeVert, the powerhouse lead singer of the OJs, and their mother Martha. Music wasn't just in their home, it was their home. In the LeVert household, the basement wasn't a game room, it was a lab. Instruments everywhere, guitars, keyboards, microphones, even Eddie's old recording gear from the Philadelphia International Records days. That's where Gerald learned discipline, sitting on the floor, watching his father work, every note a lesson. Eddie didn't treat his boys like kids, he treated them like musicians. Don't you sing unless you mean it, Eddie used to say. And Gerald listened. At just 5 years old, he was already mimicking his father's tone. Sean, younger and quieter, preferred the drums, the heartbeat that held everything together. By the time they were teenagers, Gerald was obsessed. He didn't want to be like his father, he wanted to be better. He would write songs all night, recording demos on cheap cassette tapes. But Sean wasn't so sure about music, he wanted to play sports. Still, Gerald insisted, man, we're family and family stays together. Their destiny changed when they met Mark Gordon, a gifted musician from another Cleveland neighborhood. Mark could play anything, piano, bass, violin, and his smooth energy perfectly balanced Gerald's fire. Through their mothers, who were both Jehovah's Witnesses, the boys connected. They started rehearsing in Mark's garage, calling themselves the Playmates. At first, they were just kids with big dreams sneaking into local bars and talent shows they were too young to perform in. But word spread quickly. These boys weren't just good, they were different. Their sound blended the classic harmonies of the OJs with the freshness of the new R&B generation. They cut their first demos and nervously brought them to Eddie. But he wasn't impressed. Go back, write it better, he said. And they did over and over again. Finally, when he heard the spark he was waiting for, Eddie called up his old industry friends. But no label would take them. The industry said the same thing. They sound too much like the OJs. So Eddie did what fathers do, he made a way. Alongside his friend Harry Coombs, he launched an independent label called Temporary Records, built just for his sons. In 1985, LeVert released their debut album I Get Hot, featuring the single I'm Still. The record didn't top the charts, but it opened doors. Thanks to Eddie's friendship with Don Cornelius, the group became one of the first independent acts to perform on Soul Train. That national spotlight changed everything. Soon after, Atlantic Records executive Ennis Caldwell saw them performing in Washington, D.C. He didn't just hear their music, he saw the future. Within weeks, the trio signed to Atlantic Records, and under the guidance of music executive Sylvia Rhone, they went from local talent to national stars. And when they dropped their 1986 album Bloodline, the hit Pop 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 Goes My Mind shot straight to #1 on the R&B charts. Just like that, the sons of the OJs had become legends of their own. The LeVert era had begun. By 1986, LeVert was no longer a dream, it was a movement. Three young men from Cleveland, once rehearsing in a basement, were now on stages across America. Their first major label release, Bloodline, was more than an album title. It was a declaration. It meant heritage, it meant legacy, and when Pop 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 Goes My Mind hit #1 on the R&B charts, it didn't just make them famous, it made them believers. Suddenly, the sons of the OJs weren't just standing in their father's shadow, they had carved out their own spotlight. Audiences couldn't get enough. Gerald's voice had that raw emotional fire, smooth as silk, 1 second, thunderous the next. He sang like every lyric came straight from his soul. Sean, on drums and harmonies, gave the music its heartbeat. And Mark Gordon, quiet but precise, handled production and arrangements with genius-level focus. When they performed on stage, it was magic. Matching suits, synchronized moves, sweat pouring from their faces under the stage lights, pure old-school showmanship fused with youthful swagger. Gerald commanded the mic like a preacher at a revival. He didn't sing to the crowd, he sang for them, with them. Every woman in the audience believed he was singing just for her. In 1987, they released The Big Throwdown, the album that changed everything. And its lead single, Casanova, turned them into international stars. That song was lightning in a bottle, a mix of soul, funk, and pop that could make grandmothers dance and teenagers fall in love. It hit #1 on the Billboard R&B charts, #5 on the Hot 100, and earned them a Grammy nomination. It even crossed oceans, charting in the UK and being featured in the film Fatal Beauty starring Whoopi Goldberg. For the first time, LeVert wasn't just another R&B act. They were cultural icons. The group began touring with the biggest names of the time: New Edition, Tony, LL, Cool J, Cameo, Salt and Pepper, and Troop. Everywhere they went, fans would line up for hours just to see them perform Casanova. And behind the scenes, Gerald's creativity exploded. He wasn't just writing for LeVert anymore, he was producing for other artists under their new production company, Treble Productions, LeVert spelled backwards. He worked with Mickey Howard, Troop, and even helped shape songs that would define late 80 seconds R&B. By 1988, they released Just Coolin', an album that proved they weren't slowing down. The title track, featuring Heavy D, became a milestone in music history, the first official collaboration between an R&B group and a rapper. The fusion of smooth harmonies and hip-hop rhythm paved the way for a whole new sound that dominated the 90 seconds. It was bold, it was fresh, it was LeVert. That same year, their song, Addicted to You, was featured on the Coming to America soundtrack, and by now, the trio were household names. They weren't just singers, they were storytellers of love, heartbreak, and desire. Every track carried Gerald's fingerprints, his perfectionism, his passion, his pain. But behind the applause, cracks were beginning to show. The pressure of fame, the endless touring, the need to outdo every previous success, it began to weigh on the group. Gerald was becoming the star everyone talked about, and while Sean and Mark loved him like a brother, they couldn't ignore that the spotlight was drifting toward him alone. Still, in 1990, they released another hit, Rope-A-Dope Style, with the single Baby I'm Ready reaching #1 on the R&B charts. It was another triumph, another gold record, another reminder that LeVert was unstoppable. Or so it seemed. The truth was, Gerald was restless. The industry, the expectations, the comparisons, it all started to feel too small for him. He loved his brothers, but deep down, he wanted more. He wanted his own voice, his own story, his own name. And soon, he would step out on his own, not because he wanted to leave LeVert, but because his destiny demanded it. The glory days were shining bright, but just beyond the lights, a shadow was waiting. By the early 1990 seconds, Gerald LeVert had become a force of nature, the voice, the soul, the heartbeat of an entire R&B generation. But for Gerald, success was never enough. He didn't just want to sing love songs, he wanted to own the music, to write it, produce it, live it. After Rope-A-Dope Style, LeVert was still riding high, but the whispers were growing louder. Gerald's the real star. Gerald doesn't need the group anymore. And deep down, even Gerald started to believe it. So, with the blessing and quiet heartbreak of his father, Eddie LeVert, Gerald signed a solo deal with East West Records, a branch of Atlantic. It was a risky move, but Gerald had something to prove, that he could carry his own name without the shadow of LeVert or the OJs. In 1991, he released his debut solo album, Private Line. The title track was smooth, sultry, pure Gerald, but the real gem was Baby Hold On to Me, a duet with his father. That song became more than a hit. It was a moment. A father and son, two generations of soul, standing side by side, carrying the same torch. It went straight to number 1 on the R&B charts and sold over 1 million copies. Gerald had done it. He was no longer Eddie LeVert's son. He was Gerald LeVert superstar. But fame, like fire, always burns twice as bright before it fades. While Gerald was climbing to new heights, the bond between the 3 members of LeVert began to strain. Mark and Sean wanted the group to stay united. Gerald, meanwhile, was being pulled in every direction, writing for Barry White, Mickey Howard, Men at Large, Teddy Pendergrass, and even the Rude Boys, whose hit Written All Over Your Face shot to number 1. Gerald was everywhere, in studios, on tour, on magazine covers. He was unstoppable until the exhaustion started to set in. He didn't sleep much. He barely ate. He was producing for others in the daytime, recording for himself at night. His work ethic was unmatched and unhealthy. Friends would tell him, "G, you gotta slow down." He'd just smile and say, "I'll rest when I win that Grammy." Then came 1993's For Real Though, a LeVert reunion album that reminded fans the brotherhood was still alive. But even with gold records and radio hits, things weren't the same. Fame had changed them all, especially Gerald. He followed up with his second solo album, Groove On. In 1994, a platinum success, filled with smooth bedroom anthems and heartbreak ballads. His voice was richer, his lyrics deeper. But behind those lyrics was pain, heartbreak, stress, and loneliness. He dated stars like Mickey Howard, Candy Burris, and Kim Whitley, but love never stuck. He gave his heart to the stage and left nothing for himself. By the late 90s, Gerald's legacy was solidified. He joined forces with Keith Sweat and Johnny Gill to form the R&B supergroup LSG, releasing LeVert Sweat Gill in 1997. The single My Body ruled the charts for 7 straight weeks and went double platinum. Gerald had everything: fame, money, success, but he couldn't shake the emptiness. He once said, "People think success means happiness. They don't see the nights you can't sleep, or the pressure to keep smiling when your soul is tired." To the outside world, he was a charming, confident soul singer who could make any woman melt with a note. Inside, he was a perfectionist, constantly haunted by his own expectations. And through it all, his body began to break down. The long nights, the lack of rest, the pressure to deliver it all took a toll. Gerald gained weight, battled insomnia, and turned to prescription medication to cope. But he kept pushing. He couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Because in his heart, he was still chasing something: not fame, not money, but peace. And in the years that followed, that very chase, the endless grind, the weight of success, and the quiet pain behind the spotlight would lead him down a path no one saw coming. The applause was loud, but the silence after the show was deafening. By the mid-2000s, Gerald LeVert had cemented himself as one of R&B's most powerful voices. Known for his emotive delivery, songwriting genius, and unyielding work ethic, he had achieved solo success while honoring his family legacy with the group LeVert. But behind the music, the pressures of life and career were quietly building. Gerald had recently returned from a career-defining trip to South Africa with his father, Eddie LeVert, where they performed and met Nelson Mandela. Though the journey inspired him, Gerald returned home physically drained and emotionally tense. He complained of shortness of breath and general fatigue, yet medical checkups deemed him healthy. Days later, on the 10th of November 2006, he was found unresponsive in his Cleveland home. The medical examiner ruled Gerald's death an accidental overdose. Prescription medications including Vicodin, Percocet, and Xanax, combined with over-the-counter drugs and pneumonia, overwhelmed his system. Gerald was only 40 years old. Friends, fans, and fellow artists mourned the sudden loss of a man whose music had touched millions. At his funeral, over 7,000 people attended, including Stevie Wonder, Patti LaBelle, and Bobby Brown. The Rude Boys reunited to perform, while Eddie and Sean LeVert closed the service with Dance With My Father, their voices cracking with grief. Tragedy struck again just 16 months later. Sean LeVert, Gerald's younger brother, had been incarcerated for unpaid child support. Suffering from anxiety, Sean's prescription Xanax was confiscated upon his arrival at the jail. Without proper medical attention, he began hallucinating, panicking over imagined emergencies involving his family. Restraints and isolation could not prevent the escalation, and on the 30th of March 2008, Sean died at 39 years old. The autopsy cited complications from heart disease, sarcoidosis, and Xanax withdrawal, but experts believe the jail's mishandling of his medication directly contributed to his death. Sean's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit and won a $3.7 million settlement. In his honor, Ohio passed Sean's Law, requiring every county jail to provide medical, dental, and mental health screenings upon intake, a safeguard that may have saved countless lives. The deaths of Gerald and Sean left an indelible mark on their family and the R&B community. Eddie LeVert, grieving his sons, found solace in performing with the OJs, often dedicating shows to Gerald and Sean. Their surviving brother, Mark Gordon, worked to preserve the family legacy, launching the Soul Foundation, Saving Our Entertainers' Lives, to raise awareness of prescription drug misuse among artists. Despite the heartbreak, Gerald's influence endured. In 2008, he posthumously received a Grammy Award for Best Traditional R&B Performance for his album In My Songs, a testament to his lifelong dedication to music through timeless tracks like Casanova, Baby Hold On To Me, and Private Line. The LeVert brothers' voices continue to echo, defining an era of soulful authenticity. Gerald and Sean LeVert were more than performers, they were hearts and souls of a generation whose music still resonates decades later. Though their lives ended too soon, their artistry remains a legacy of passion, talent, and the enduring power of R&B. Rest in peace, Gerald and C. The story of Gerald and Sean LeVert is one of extraordinary talent shadowed by tragedy. From a young age, they were immersed in music, nurtured by their legendary father, Eddie LeVert, and destined to make their mark. Together, they carried forward a legacy rooted in soul, harmony, and heartfelt storytelling. Yet, behind the bright lights and sold-out shows, pressures of fame, financial responsibilities, and personal struggles quietly festered. Gerald, the powerhouse vocalist and prolific songwriter, poured his heart into every note, every lyric, always chasing perfection. Sean, though more reserved, balanced the group with his musicianship and steadfast presence. Both brothers endured the highs and lows of the music industry, chart-topping hits, platinum albums, and worldwide recognition, but also the toll of health challenges, medication dependency, and the weight of expectation. Their untimely deaths at 40 and 39 were more than just personal tragedies. They were cautionary tales about the vulnerability of artists under the pressures of fame. Gerald's passing from accidental overdose and Sean's death in jail due to improper withdrawal management highlight the critical need for awareness around mental health, addiction, and medical care in high-pressure environments. Yet, even in loss, their legacy thrives. Gerald's posthumous Grammy and the continued influence of LeVert's music on modern R&B testify to the brothers' lasting impact. Eddie LeVert's dedication to preserving their music, along with Mark Gordon's foundation Soul, ensures that their story serves as both inspiration and a lesson for future generations of entertainers. Ultimately, the LeVert story is a reminder of the human side of stardom. Behind every hit and every stage performance is a life with struggles, triumphs, and love. Gerald and Sean LeVert gave the world soul, emotion, and authenticity that will never fade. Their voices, their songs, and their spirit continue to resonate, reminding us that true artistry leaves a legacy that even tragedy cannot silence. N. LeVert.